Well, from a audio video perspective, we are prepared to go forward.
Awesome. Myself and Andrew and Lexi can start admitting individuals from the waiting room.
Okay, do that now, and I'll just wait another minute or so, and then once you've let those individuals in, we'll start the meeting.
I would probably recommend waiting a minute or two, just since there is the 2 duplicate meeting invites. So we can just welcome participants as they come in and just say we'll be starting in a minute or 2, if that's all right.
It's okay, we'll give it a couple more minutes.
Hey, Rachel.
Yeah.
On this upgraded Zoom, when I click on participants, I'm not seeing where the raise hand is.
I believe that's because you are a co-host.
So it doesn't let me raise hands?
That's correct.
Okay.
And it might actually be on the reactions button.
I have clapping and thumbs up on that reactions button.
I'll just confirm, since I'm not a host, that is the place where one who has access can do the raise hand item.
Under participants?
No, under reactions.
Under reactions. Okay.
Great, thank you for confirming. Hi all, welcome. We'll be giving it a minute or 2 for participants to be joining. Thank you for attending.
Okay, I'm going to kick off here at 6:05.
Sounds good.
So everybody having a good day? Nice.
Nothing like spring to put a smile on your face, you know? It's beautiful. Okay. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the City of Port Hueneme Special Meeting General Plan Workshop on this Tuesday, March 30th, 2021. The time is 6:05, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. This meeting will be conducted pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N29-20 and the orders of the Ventura County Public Health Officer issued March 20th, 2020. Stay well at home order. Madam Clerk, will you take roll, please?
Councilmember Hernandez?
I see her.
Here. Councilmember Martinez?
Present.
Councilmember Perez?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Rollins
Here.
and Mayor Gama.
Here. Could everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And Charles will place a flag on our Zoom meeting screen.
Rachel, I believe you have that. Perfect, thank you.
Okay, if you could please place your hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the
of the United States of America
and to the
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible,
with
liberty
for
and
all.
justice for all.
For all. That's always a little awkward with the Zoom. Thank you all for participating. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments before we get started?
We do not have any general public comments, but we will be reading one public comment pertaining to the general plan workshop here shortly.
Okay. I'm going to turn this presentation over to Rachel Raynor.
I believe Lexi and Tony will be kicking it off for us, actually.
Sorry for putting you on the spot, Rachel.
No, it's okay. It's all good.
I'll go ahead and take over. This is Tony Stewart, Community Development Director for the City of Port Hueneme. And before I introduce the rest of the team in the project this evening, why don't I go ahead and turn it back over quickly to our city clerk so she can read that public comment on this particular item into the record for us. Christy?
Thank you, Tony. We received one public comment from Mr. Mark Sabala, and it reads, Letter to Port Hueneme City Council, public comment on no name change. The City of Port Hueneme is in the process of updating their city plan. They are planning on a Zoom open meeting on March 30th, 2021. One of the items is whether to change the name of Port Hueneme from Port Hueneme to Hueneme Beach. I believe that this change is unnecessary for numerous reasons. The first of which was the fact that the citizens that established the city chose this name and they voted on it for many reasons. The Port of Hueneme is and was a world-class port and supported a great deal of the income for the city. The citizens were proud of this fact, and I would guess that a great number of people now work for the port. Most of our citizens have lived and raised their families in Port Hueneme and have roots and continue to live here. If they would like more business traffic or visitors in general, they can certainly vote to increase and improve the attributes which draw people, such things as up-to-date, clean, entertaining, and accessible beach, etc. A few of the supporters of this name change suggest that the change will bring more visitors to the area. It is not my experience that the name of a location from port to beach has any impact on whether I would visit a location. I would like to see the estimated cost that would be incurred by just the name change to the city budget. The cost of every form, letterhead, document, etc. would probably be better spent to increase the number of first responders, the cost of training, and the cost to improve the attributes already in place instead of spending the money on form changes, etc. The city planning survey information documents that 94 responders to the question of changing the name of Port Hueneme to Port Hueneme Beach. Of the 94 responders, 54 voted yes, 40 voted no. These numbers are a little disingenuous. The population of Port Hueneme in 2018 was 22,173. So 94 people is only 0.0042 of the population. The yes vote of 54 is 0.0024 of the population, and the no vote of 40 is 0.0018 of the population. The numbers alone are not a particularly good argument for the name change. If the leaders supporting this agenda would like to have a citywide vote that would be a more accurate state of mind of the city regarding this topic, that would certainly be a fair manner to respond to the will of all the citizens. Hopefully, common sense and a fair, impartial voting by the populace would ensure the leaders of the city do what the citizens prefer. Please make your opinion heard by writing, calling, or participating in the upcoming planning by the city. Signed, Mark J. Sabala. And that concludes the public comments for this item.
Thank you, Christy. what we're doing this evening here, this is our second community workshop for the general plan. This time it's a fairly meaty section or workshop in that we are looking at the housing element, which is the only state mandated element of the general plan. But we're also having a look at the land use element and some potential changes to that because of needing to accommodate some new units in a completely built out city. We're also looking at a couple of new components, the climate action plan, as well as the social equity element. The climate action plan is something that we've needed for a while, and the social equity element is a new requirement whenever you're doing a substantial upgrade to a general plan like we are. So those are the four topics that we'll be focusing on this evening. And then we'll have additional workshops, meetings for the other elements as we move through the process. So with that, I also want to just make note that when we do get to the land use element, as well as the name change portion, these are just conceptual at this point, and there are going to be many other opportunities for discussion and input. And so with that, I'm about to turn this over to Lexi Journey, who's our project manager for Rincon. She also has a team of consultants with her, including this evening. We have Debbie Rudd from RRM, who will be also doing quite a bit of the presentation this evening, as well as the consultant who's probably the best known housing consultant in the state. And we're lucky to have her on board, because if there's anybody who will help us get our housing element approved by HCD, it would be Veronica Tam. And so she'll be walking us through that portion of this evening's workshop. We'll have several stops for questions as we go along, so folks don't have to hold their questions till the end. However, we do ask that we at least get to those question points before we open them up. We'll also have the chat available as well. So with that, Lexi, I'll turn it over to you. You can formally introduce the team and move us through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for that great introduction. I feel like you did a good job introducing the team already. Again, my name is Lexi Journey with Rincon Consultants and the project manager for the entire consultant team. And with us, we have Debbie Rudd from RRM, who will also be facilitating the workshop, as well as Rachel Rayner. And then from the Rincon team, we also have Joe Power, who's principal in charge of the project. And we have Andrew Hatt, who is also an associate on the project. And with that, I'll pass it over to Debbie to go over some virtual meeting etiquette.
Hi, everyone. So tonight we are having a Zoom meeting. You have the option of joining us via your computer or iPad, or you also have the option of joining us via phone. And this meeting is being recorded. So if you are joining with your phone, you can watch it later. It is being recorded, so if you don't want your face to be recorded, just turn off your camera, and your microphones are muted. But when we get to a spot where we're taking questions and answering questions, we will ask you to raise your hand virtually, and then the host will unmute you. The next slide shows a snapshot of the bar that's probably at the bottom of your screen. It may be at the top if you're using an iPad, but the unmute and mute button is over on your left-hand side, and your video to control whether your camera is on is right there. And if you are going to raise your hand, I have it shown that you're going to go to participants, but you're actually going to go to reactions, and under reactions, you'll have the option to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. But you can also ask a question in the chat function. You can just click on the chat icon. And if you don't have it now, there's two ways to view the screen. One is the speaker view. That way you'll be able to see our PowerPoint. And then there's the gallery view if you just want to see the people. So tonight's meeting, we're going to give you a presentation, and we're going to integrate throughout the presentation some voting and polling options. And we're going to stop a few times, like Tony said, for questions and answers, and then again at the end of the presentation. We're at the early stages of the general plan update. So what we're presenting tonight are suggestions and strategies and recommendations, but nothing set in stone yet. We are still gathering your feedback to shape what this general plan is going to look like. So the three main items that we're going to be covering, sorry, Rachel, are housing and land use changes, climate action strategies, and social equity policies. Those are three things we're going to be covering tonight. So to start off the polling, we wanted to get an idea of who's in the, what participants are here, and like you to click on whether you're a homeowner, renter, you work in the city, or you're just here because you're curious about the project, and you can click on as many as you want. And then second, did you participate in workshop number 1? And while everyone is taking that, Rachel will, at the end, show us the results, so we'll have an idea of where we ended up. So it looks like it's primarily homeowners and people who work in the city. And it's kind of it's split 50-50 of people who came to workshop at number 1 and didn't. Interesting. If you didn't come to the first workshop, it is posted on the city website, so you can watch it and see what the results are. But we're going to go over those next.
I'm going to go ahead and start sharing the results, but I think you can already see them because I brought it over to my screen share. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's nice.
Great.
All right. Great, thank you, Rachel.
Awesome.
So I'd like to touch on, and if the results are still on your screen, just click on the X as we go through so we can see the next slide. So on November 19th in 2020, we had our first community workshop, and I just want to touch on a few results from that first workshop. On land use and housing, there was a lot of support for creating a designated downtown area, an area that is kind of your identifiable downtown, your more traditional identifiable downtown. And on opportunity sites and economic development, people were interested in using the underutilized commercial sites for residential or for mixed use development. Since we know we have to find some sites for residential for the housing element. For focus areas of the general plan, what people want the general plan to focus on, what they're most interested in, it was beautification and community design. And then other local issues that people were interested in included environmental protection, noise, more lighting, homelessness, better beach access, beach amenities, and facilities. After the workshop, we launched a questionnaire, and that questionnaire was on the website, both in Spanish and English. And a quick summary of the questionnaire results include that people were still really appreciate Port Huenemi's small town character and the access to the beach. For transportation, they really have a desire for transit improvements, including enhanced bus stops, enhanced pedestrian or bicycle routes to nearby transit, and increase the number of bus stops in the city. For community design and development, the desire to expand or improve local outdoor dining or high-end dining, shopping, and employment opportunities were all popular. For city improvement and beautification, the desire to improve lighting and facilities along the beachfront, like walkability and landscaping throughout the city. And for social equity and environmental justice, issues of concern included air quality pollution, inequity of services between neighborhoods, and affordable housing all in that. And so if you would like to take a deeper dive on what the results were of the questionnaire and of the workshop, you can go to the city website, and there's a general plan webpage. It's moving slowly. You can get to that at gp2045@cityofporthueneme.org. And there's the questionnaire results, the full questionnaire results. So there are 2 questions on the questionnaire that we wanted to dive a little deeper into understanding. The first one is the downtown area. People like the idea of having a downtown area, but what we're asking is, what kind of amenities would you want to have in that downtown area? What would make it feel like a downtown to you? So we have street lights and banners, and this picture on the far left shows street light. It shows street furniture with benches and trash cans, outdoor dining, restaurants, retail shops, mixed use residential. When we say mixed use residential, we mean kind of commercial on the ground floor and residential above, or could be side by side commercial and residential. And if there's something else that you would like to see, if you could write it in the chat, we'll be able to record that as well. Restaurants, everybody wants restaurants, or at least outdoor dining. And more retail too. Okay, that's a pretty nice mix.
I'll give it a couple more seconds, Debbie. We received a couple more respondents from last time. Just want to make sure everyone is able to respond.
Okay.
All right, I'll go ahead and end the poll for question number 2.
Thank you. The second question that we wanted to follow up on from the questionnaire has to do with the renaming of the city of Port Hueneme to Hueneme Beach. And those of you who were at the call in the beginning, we heard the letter. And what the city wanted to make clear is I want to clarify that the changing of the city name is not going to be part of the general plan effort, but the city thought it would be a good opportunity, since we're having a lot of public meetings, we're having questionnaires. It would be a good opportunity to start the dialogue and the discussion and understand better why people want it changed and why people don't want it changed. We've heard from our stakeholder interviews that people like the idea of changing it because they felt like Hueneme Beach highlights the true amenities of the area, that it creates a better distinction between the port and the city, and that there can be sometimes confusion between Port of Hueneme and Port Hueneme, and that it could be good for marketing. We heard in the letter some of the things that people were questioning about it, and what we'd like to know tonight is what you feel is, are you supportive of this, yes or no? And then if no, if you could give us some feedback, and you could actually add feedback there too, if you are supportive of it, in the chat, what things you like about it, what things you don't like about it. Are you gonna launch the question poll, Rachel?
We have responses coming in. Can you not see it on your screen?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I can't. Maybe I just need
I'm having an issue with the questionnaire. It won't allow me to submit.
Oh, because she hasn't launched it yet, right?
No, actually, if you answer yes, it still requires an answer to number 2. So you have to put an answer for number 2 to hit the submit, unfortunately.
Okay.
Or if you answer no, then you answer question 2.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying. I will, once we get maybe 10 or 11 respondents, I'll share the results. so then everyone can see. I would be curious though, if I don't see any comments coming through the chat, but we do have a couple respondents that noted other, and maybe that's just because they had to select an answer, so they selected that. But if there are specific comments of why someone answered no or yes, we'd welcome them in the chat function. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and I'll share the results at this time.
So slightly more yes, but not overwhelmingly. And the concern has to do with cost of effort, like the name as it is. And then we had 6 people write in, say, other. So the people who wrote other, if you could add to the chat, that would be great so we have an understanding. I see prefer name change. I see want visibility and amenities to fix up all.
I just wrote other because it was the only way I could submit the form.
Oh.
If you click yes, you have to pick something from below. Otherwise, other was the only one that made any sense.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that those 6 votes were the six people that were okay with changing the name were the ones that said other.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that. So with that, we'll take a quick pause to open it up for questions. If anybody has a question, they can. I see Mark has a question. Rachel, can you unmute him? He's just raising his hand, but not virtually.
Last name?
Savalla, S-A-V-A-L-L-A.
Oh, there you go. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I wrote that letter that was presented. I didn't get in time to see if that's the one you read, but I sent the letter in, and I think it's absolutely ludicrous to change the name. The people that made the name had reasons for it. People that live here and have lived here are probably proud of it. There's a lot of people that work at the port. The port supports probably, I don't know what percentage of the income of the city, but it's very important. And I think it's just fine the way it is. And the percentage and number of people that have voted for and against it are absolutely trivial when you come to the total population of the city. And if some of the woke generation wants to change this name just to be mildly amusing about it, that's fine. But something this big, I think an entire city vote would be more preferable than the numbers of people you've got voting in this questionnaire. That's my position.
Thank you. Yes, and they did read your letter, the full thing at the beginning of the meeting. And I just want to reiterate, that's not going to be part of the general plan update process, but they wanted to start getting feedback, just like your feedback tonight. And the council's all here so they can hear both sides of the story. And you're right, we don't have a lot of feedback at this point.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And it sounds like you guys are doing a great job. Thanks.
Any other questions? Oh, I see Laura Hernandez, hands up.
Yeah, Councilmember Hernandez. I wanted to know if you could explain for our audience the different methods that you use to solicit this information on the questionnaire. I saw it a lot on Facebook and I saw it on Nextdoor. Did you use any other social media tools or newspaper or any other way to reach our community besides social media?
Rachel and Tony, could you expand on that a little bit for us?
Sure. We didn't put it in the newspaper, but we did put it on the website. We sent it out to our stakeholders. We also sent it out to our homeowners associations, and then all of our citywide social media accounts.
Okay. It just seems 93 is not a whole lot of, I mean, I would have hoped for a better response. So just wondering. Thank you.
All right, with that, why don't we go on and let Lexi give
Sure, thanks, Debbie.
an update.
Yeah, we're going to go into, before we dive into those three main areas that Debbie talked about, do again a general plan update overview in case there were any folks that weren't with us in the last workshop. And so first, I'll start off with the project timeline so people know the time frame that we're working in for this general plan update process. And as you can see, starting from summer of 2020 is where we conducted our technical background report that is available on the city website that goes into analysis of what's happening in the city now and all the different issues areas for the general plan. And so that is available and different technical analysis there. At the same time, we also did stakeholder interviews with various stakeholders throughout the community, including people that have businesses throughout the city, the Chamber of Commerce, talked to the school districts. We talked to a variety of people and got their sense of what was going on in the city, what potential issues and what potential opportunities there are for this general plan update process. And then in the fall, and going into the spring, where we're about now, is doing virtual community engagement for the general plan update process. But we are going to continue to do the engagement till the end of the adoption. So we had our last workshop in November. We had the questionnaire that was up for almost 2 months in December and January. We're having this workshop, and we will continue to have another workshop once the general plan update is released. And then we will be conducting the environmental review of the general plan. Once we complete a draft of it coming up pretty soon, we'll be working on the environmental review analysis of the general plan and for a release of both of those within this summer. And then lastly, that puts us at a public hearing to approve the general plan update in EIR in this year fall. So as a reminder for folks, what is a general plan? It is a visionary policy document that guides the current and future decision-making for the city. It's a plan that represents the city as it is today and provides policies to help guide the city and the community to where they want to go in the future. And by future, I mean 25 years. So this is looking out until 2045. And as the name general plan entails, it provides a big picture and high level of general goals and policies to help guide zoning and various activities permitted within the city. It also provides direction for city staff on how they can support different initiatives and coordination that occurs throughout the city. The main components of the general plan that we'll be focusing on today, which I'll be explaining in more detail, include the housing element, which is the only element that is required to be updated every several years. And we'll also be talking about these two new elements to the general plan update. First one is the climate action plan element. It's a newer initiative taken by cities across the state to support state goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change. And it also provides another way of adapting to climate change is having policies in this element. The state also has an incentive for cities to do this by providing grant funding for city projects that have a climate action plan. And then the other new element is the social equity element. It's also a new state requirement. And social equity, as it relates to this plan, generally means that the city develops policies that are fair to all members of its community. In other words, making sure that policies developed help all members of the community get access to the same opportunities, such as improved air quality, opportunities of recreational access, and housing. And lastly, another unique component of the general plan update is the local coastal planner program. This is very similar to the general plan, but it's specific to the coastal zone, which is a state designated boundary. And the local coastal program develops a set of policies for that coastal zone that goes through state review through a state agency, the Coastal Commission, so that the Coastal Commission can get their approval of the plan to ensure that is consistent with the Coastal Act. And the different topics and organization of the general plan include the following. So this is how the general plan is organized. Each one is its own element and topic within the general plan, starting with land use, circulation, housing, which we'll be going into, public safety and facilities, noise and air quality, conservation, open space, environmental element is its own element. And then the new elements that we have are climate action plan element and a social equity element. And lastly, the local coastal program. So I want to take a pause before we go into those special topic areas to see if there are any questions at this point before we jump into those. Not seeing any in the chat. Are there any hands raised?
I don't see any at this time, Lexi.
All right, then we can keep moving forward and we're gonna have plenty of opportunities for more questions as we go. So we're gonna start with housing and land use changes. And to give an overview of the housing element, we have Veronica Tam with us. And so she'll be presenting the slide giving us some background on housing element updates.
Great, thanks, Lexi. I'm just going to go ahead and give a very kind of brief overview of what is the housing element and some of the basic requirements. Just like Lexi and Debbie mentioned before, the housing element is part of your general plan. It's one of the required elements of the general plan. But what sets the housing element apart from the rest of the general plan in that it has to be updated more regularly compared to the rest of the general plan. Now, typically, your general plan has a horizon of about 20 years. The housing element has to be updated every 8 years. It's on a statutory deadline. And what we're dealing with right now for the 6th cycle update of the housing element, the statutory deadline is October 15, 2021. It covers the 8-year housing element all the way through October 15, 2029. The housing element is probably the most legally regulated element of the entire general plan. It's governed by statutes and in the government code. When we sent the housing element to the state for review, and I think Tony mentioned that before too, that the housing element is the only element that has to be reviewed by a state agency for compliance with state law. The agency responsible for that is the State Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. So when we have the housing element, we send it to the state for review. There is almost like an overriding requirement for their review is this whole concept of regional housing needs assessment, RHNA. I think throughout the general plan update and the housing element update, you'll hear HCD, the agency responsible for the review, and RHNA, Regional Housing Needs Assessment, quite frequently. The RHNA allocates housing growth throughout the state and throughout for every jurisdiction in the state to be responsible for over the next 8 years. The city of Port Hueneme has received an allocation of 125 units over the next 8 years. This is the amount of growth that the city is responsible for being part of the region, your share of the region's needs, and that you need to be planning for it. And through the general plan, that's what we're going to do, identify areas through land use policies and development regulations, how the city can potentially accommodate 125 units over 8 years. The Regional Housing Needs Allocation or Assessment, RHNA, is not a production requirement. It doesn't require the city to build the unit. It doesn't require property owners to do anything. You can keep exactly what you have. The only change is that based on land use policy and zoning regulations, that we can potentially accommodate that much housing in the next 8 years. Now, when we have a housing element that's regulated by state law and it has to be reviewed by a state agency for compliance, there are consequences for not complying with state law. The main one is that the city will not be eligible for state funds. Currently, the general plan update is partially funded by housing grants that is contingent upon having a continued compliance housing element. And that's what we're working towards as part of the general plan. I'm going to stop right here. I'll be happy to answer more detailed questions later on, but I'll pass it on to Debbie or Lexi.
Thanks, Veronica, for giving us that background. And I apologize for not introducing you at the very beginning of the talk. So what does this mean for Port Hueneme specifically? The main update to the housing element and then consequently to the city's land use designation is the update of certain land use changes to meet the state housing requirements, or RHNA. To show that the city has the land use designations and associated allowable housing density to meet these goals, one residential site was upzoned from medium residential density to a high residential density. This allows for a higher number of dwelling units at this location. And it allows the city to meet the medium density to get credit for affordable housing. In other words, by showing the locations with a land use that allows a certain density of housing units, the city can meet their affordable housing requirements from the state. For Port Hueneme, to meet the housing requirement, they have to show a certain amount of areas that are allowed to have 20 housing units per acre, which is met by the high density residential land use. The other land use changes that we are proposing are a redesignation of a few aging commercial lots to a mixed use designation. By making this change to mixed use, it allows the city to have both housing and commercial areas on that same parcel. The amount of residential that can occur on a mixed use density is 15 to 25 dwelling units per acre. This also shows for a new retail, this also allows for new retail and restaurants to meet community needs, particularly in the proposed downtown area, as Debbie was discussing earlier. And lastly, the land use in the general plan element will incorporate policies to ensure compatibility with military operations, as that is also another requirement. And so on the next slide, I'll be showing where these land use changes are. And these are proposed land use changes again. The first one, and we're going to zoom in here, so don't worry, is on Channel Islands Boulevard and Victoria. And the existing land use on this parcel is commercial. And so the proposed change is high density residential, again, to meet that RHNA allocation from the state. And then the second one that you can see is proposed changing from a commercial use to a mixed use right there on Channel Islands Boulevard. And then the third location on Channel Islands in Ventura Road, that existing land use is a commercial land use, and the proposed change is to mixed use. And then the fourth one down south is on Ventura Road and Pleasant Valley Road, and the existing land use there is commercial with the proposed land use change to mixed use. And the fifth area is on Port Hueneme Road and Surfside Drive. That existing land use is medium density residential, and the proposed land use is high density residential. And then the last one is on Ventura Boulevard and Port Hueneme Road to Market Street. And that existing land use is commercial with the proposed change to both mixed use in the pink and then port in the blue.
And Lexi, we might want to just explain, when we're saying mixed use, we're talking about a combination of residential and commercial. Most likely it could be residential, commercial, and office. So a mixture of all of those. And we also
just
point out
go ahead, Debbie.
Number one is, you can see here, is the existing land use is mixed use, and we're proposing it to be high density residential.
Right, yeah,
Oh, yes.
I think Lexi said commercial and she meant mixed use.
Yeah, my apologies. And so again, I believe we have another break in case anyone has any questions, comments on those proposed land use changes.
Lexi, let's go first with Misty Perez. It was the first hand up I saw. If you want to go ahead and unmute, Misty.
Hi, yes. I thought that number one, because of the California Coastal Commission, had to be a mixed use.
This is Tony. Councilmember Perez, you are correct. The Coastal Commission did require a certain amount of commercial for that site. However, the property owner has been having nothing but difficulties trying to find anybody to go in there, and is interested in possibly pursuing going back to the Coastal Commission, especially based on the new housing regulations and the need for so much new housing in California, and basically asking to have that be a 100% residential development if they'll allow it. So that's why we're pursuing it at this point.
Got it. Thank you.
Stephen Gama, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question, please? Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. So with number 2, that's currently the Casa Villamar Hotel, and I'm wondering, would this change affect them in any way?
This is Tony again. We've had, there are a couple owners in that property. We've got the hotel itself, and we've got the remainder of the site, which is the tennis courts or the racquetball court in the back. And they in particular are interested in pursuing a residential zone. So at this point, this mixed use zone at least would allow the addition of residential, but at the same time, it also allows commercial uses. And so it not necessarily would affect the hotel itself, for instance. It would really be up to those property owners how they wanted to handle it, but it allows them some flexibility and also allows us the possibility of increasing our residential numbers.
Okay, and then my next question is number 3. I think I understand that change, but what my question is, what about the corner of Pleasant Valley and Ventura Road, that shopping center? I understand that there is talk possibly of high density housing in there as an option to what's currently there. Okay, is that, so yeah, I don't, okay, there it is. Now I see it, but it doesn't have a number. The peak is tied to 6, but no, that's not it. Where's Pleasant Valley? Here it is. Number 4. Okay, so number 4 is that being upgraded?
Correct. So, and that's again based on discussions with one of the property owners out there. You are correct in that they are pursuing the idea of residential, at least on the former Mary's Market site. So we're looking at the entire shopping center with the exception of the Jack in the Box, which is the little red spot right on the corner there. But the rest of it, again, providing the same flexibility for all of the property owners as to whether they want to maintain their commercial or if they want to redevelop with a mix, or just simply go completely residential.
Okay, and then my final question is on number 6. Why is not the whole Market Street property pink? Why is that portion blue?
Right now, if we made it all pink, and if the port was interested in pursuing that, they basically wouldn't be able to have any port-related uses because they're not allowed in the mixed-use zone. So based on discussions underway, we have left the blue as potential port-related uses, and then the rest would be mixed use.
Okay, what if negotiations, I mean, this is just a what if, hypothetical. If an agreement can't be reached, then we would not be able to entertain residential, high density residential in that blue area?
Well, keep in mind, all of this right now is still conceptual. So we have some time to reevaluate and finalize the land use, all of these land use areas. Like I said, this is really our first crack at it, presenting it this evening to everybody. And there is the potential for fine tuning any one of these throughout the process.
And then finally, there's, I'm kind of disorientated with this map, but there is a property on Surfside Drive that is positioned between the city-owned property and the VFW. And again, I know the property is in limbo right now, and it appears to be a site where high density condominiums, residential could be an option. And I was just wondering if that site was under consideration for change.
No, that one's not. The property owners, current and potential, have not expressed interest in any rezoning. As you're aware, it's the purple area that we're looking at. That purple area in general is our only industrial area in the city. It's very small already. And so at this point, due to the size and due to the fact that there hasn't been any interest shown by the property owners, we didn't consider that for redesignation at this time.
Yeah, I spoke to a real estate person recently about that area, and well, it's got an interesting history, and it went from being a productive area to now nothing because of the cannabis interest and property purchasing. So yeah, I just think that perhaps we could look at that area and get creative and maybe inspire thought for residential condominium type usage. Thank you.
Richard, I saw your hand up. Did you want to ask a couple questions?
Yes. These are maybe some general questions, but I think I know, but what's considered downtown nowadays in Port Hueneme? Is it basically the Channel Island Shopping Center, or there's other kind of commercial establishments, but I'm assuming that the general thought is that the Channel Island Shopping Center is considered downtown, or maybe not. Can you clarify that?
Councilmember Rollins, it's Tony again. I think it really depends on how you define downtown. As you're probably aware, the city used to have a downtown, but with redevelopment coming through in the 70s and 80s, and it was along Market and Port Hueneme Road, basically. where we're looking at it again, item number 6 there. That was the formal downtown. It's where the Civic Center was. It's where you had a lot of older housing because it is the oldest part of the city. You had a lot of businesses along there, and it really did function as a formal walkable downtown area. Most of that has been redeveloped. And so at this point, even though the Civic Center is still down there and there's still some shopping, it probably isn't necessarily what somebody would consider a downtown, but at the same time, it's really up to how you define it, whether or not, say, the shopping centers, especially Mandalay, but any of the shopping centers along Channel Islands would also constitute a downtown. I think for a true definition of a downtown, at this point, Port Hueneme pretty much lacks one. When you think of downtowns, traditionally, you think of downtown Ventura, you think of downtown Oxnard, but cities such as Simi Valley and Port Hueneme have really lost their downtown areas and don't have any traditional downtown at this point.
Okay. The second question is, I mean, like I just know in like stories of buildings, maybe you have it by heights, but what is considered medium density and high density? I know it's a very sensitive subject, like in urban areas, like as to how high, many cities have like, story limits as far as like 4 stories, 7 stories, whatever amount of stories as far as the limit for stories. Do we have it, first of all, any kind of limit for stories? And then what is considered medium and high density housing?
We do have limits, and it depends on the zone. Most of our residential zones are 2 to 3 stories maximum height. Mixed use can go up to 5. If the project on Victoria ever gets built, that would be a 5-story one. Medium density depends on how you define it, which city. In our particular city, medium density is a maximum of 15 units per acre, and high density is roughly 20 units per acre, 22. So that's what we currently define it as here in Port Hueneme.
Okay, and then I guess the final question, I heard at the beginning, to meet our housing needs in the next 25 years, we have to increase our housing by 125. Of that 125, is there any requirements regarding low income? And maybe you can further define the terms. You have low income housing, you have what's called affordable income housing, you have moderate income housing, and maybe those aren't the proper categories, but how many within that 125 are we required to put in? I mean, can we say we want to put in 125 high-cost condominiums, or do we have, for example, do we have to say we have to have 125 low-income housing? So maybe you can further kind of talk about that.
Sure. So the general classifications, and they're based on the percentage of a household's income compared to the regional median income, would be Ventura counties in this case, of course. And they're very low income, moderate, and above moderate are the general 4 categories. And I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I believe it's 41 or so that would have to fall into the very low and low income categories. And then the remainder could be the moderate and above moderate. And again, those are the numbers that we are supposed to be trying to meet. And of course, we could always exceed them in certain categories, but HCD does want us to try to at least meet the minimums for each of those categories.
Tony, I have the exact number. I was pulling that up while you were speaking. So for Ventura County, for Port Hueneme, we're talking about 125 units, and it's not for the entire 25-year general plan. It's only for the next 8 years. Among the 125 units, 26 units has to be very low income, 16 units for low income, 18 units for moderate, and above moderate income is 65 units. If you would hang on a little bit, I'm going to tell you what the income limits are regarding the different income categories, but I guess we can go to other questions at this time.
Okay. There was one other one I had, but somehow it's escaped me right now. Maybe I'll ask a little later on.
While Veronica's pulling that up, do we have any further questions from the participants? I don't see any currently in the chat that have not already been answered, or any raised hands. Yeah, Richard?
I did have one. Perhaps you can fulfill me in what category this particular development was. When I had heard when the hideaways were developed, in order to get that development completed, certain units had to be set aside for, I'm not sure which category, but I'm going to say low or very low income housing within those hideaway units. First of all, were those rental units or those, and maybe it's a question for everything. When you're talking about housing, you're talking strictly about owned housing or rental unit housing, and then what categories did those fall under?
Councilmember Rollins, so the city has, it's actually the very last ordinance in our zoning ordinance, has what we call an inclusionary zoning regulation. And what it means in this case is that any development in the coastal zone, so if it's not in the coastal zone, it doesn't apply. But if it's within the coastal zone, such as the Hideaway project was, the developer has to either set aside a certain number of units for low income families, or has to provide a cash in lieu of $26,500 per unit. In the case of the Hideaway project, the owners or the developers at the time opted to provide the required 9 units for that. The city, the housing authority is responsible for those, and we rent those out. But when it comes to the definition of low income, if it has to be ownership or not, there's no definition of it. They can be for rent or they can be for own, by owners. The Habitat project that was recently approved and about to break ground is a great example of a low-income owner-occupied project. So you'll have 5 property owners out there, but other low-income projects can be rented. So it's really up to the property owner.
Is the $26,000 per unit that the developer could have put to something, does that go into some fund then to buy or to subsidize low-income housing someplace else?
Yes, that's a great question. And yes, it does. It goes into a special fund. It's not part of the general fund. And that is, we used for the Habitat project, and you approved that, we basically provided out of that fund $26,500 per unit. So it's $132,500 for the total project that we provided to Habitat to assist them with providing that affordable housing project.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
The income limits and the income categories are now in the chat, reported in the chat.
Thank you so much, Veronica. Kendall, I see that you have your hand raised. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yes. Hello. Sorry I joined late, everybody. I had a question regarding the proposed land use changes for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. Sorry, I'm doing this off my iPhone. We can't use Zoom on our Navy assets. My question for the areas that are, I understand that this is very high level conceptual right now, but for the, call it parcels for areas, I'm gonna just call them parcels for the time being, that are potentially slated for high density residential or mixed use. I think I heard Tony say mixed use can go up to 5 stories. As far as the high density, that's 22 dwelling units per acre. So is that what I heard correctly?
That's correct. It's roughly 22.
Okay. So I guess, does the city of Port Hueneme have a maximum height for imaginary planes or transition surfaces for air operations at all?
No, we don't.
Okay. When the sites, get more refined, that would be something to look at for the public safety and for future residents if they do want to live there. A lot of that is actually covered in our Air Installations Compatible Use Zone Study, or ACUS, as well as the Joint Land Use Study. And I could share the copies of those to the team if the city and the team doesn't have those right now.
If you could put the names of those reports in the chat, that would be helpful for our notes.
Certainly. Thank you.
Yeah, and I believe, and Lexi, you could correct me if I'm wrong, we're actually looking at least at the joint land use study already as part of our background and policy considerations for the project.
Correct. But thank you for mentioning that plan as well, Kendall. And access to it. We'll definitely use that too.
Certainly. Thank you.
Great, Lexi. At this time, I don't see any other hands raised or active comments in the chat. Would you like to proceed?
Yeah, so we'll move on from housing and land use to another new component of the general plan update, which is the climate action plan. Again, a climate action plan element is a plan element that has strategies to support state goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change, as well as strategies to adapt to climate change. I'll give you some specific examples of strategy we want to get the community's input on, but for now, what I mean, and Rachel, if you could go back to the other slide, actually. For what I mean is ways to reduce energy use in buildings, water use, etc. Because the state is providing benefits to communities for having these plans, there's a specific process that the state mandates to develop the climate action strategies and have a credible plan. So before I get into it, I just want to warn you, it's pretty technical, so bear with me, but I feel like it provides good context for how these strategies are developed and the technical analysis involved. And we'll definitely take a break after, but if you have any questions while I'm going through it, feel free to put it in the chat. So now we can go to the next slide. So how does the state require cities to develop climate action strategies? There are 6 big steps they require. And I'm going to go into what each of these generally mean. So for number 1, the baseline inventory. This is how many GHG emissions is the city generating. I'll show you a graph on the next slide. But what I mean by this is how much electricity is being used, how much natural gas is being used, how many cars are being driven in the city, how much water is being used, and how much waste the city generates. The second one, number 2, forecast emissions. How many greenhouse gas emissions will the city generate in the future? So we know how much activity is happening in the city now with that baseline inventory, but the next step is calculating how much we forecast or estimate for the future based on how much growth we assume will be happening in the city. Number 3 is adoption target. This is looking at how much does the city want to reduce its greenhouse gas emission and what time frame. Do they want to reduce it by 25%, 55%, 75%, and when? And the state goal is 40% below 1990 greenhouse gas emission levels by 2030. So most cities are in line with the state goals. Number 4 is what we'll be talking about today, is the strategy selection. Once we've done all the other pieces, we can then be informed to figure out what the city is going to do to meet these goals. This is an important part, and that these are the actions the city is committing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Number 5, funding and implementation, is what are the steps the city needs to take to implement these strategies, and how is the funding and how is the city going to fund these actions? And then lastly, number 6, monitor and track progress. This is how is the city going to track their progress so that they can show the state how much they're accomplishing and get credit for it. So this is a snapshot of number 1, the baseline inventory. So you can understand where the emissions are coming from within the city. So as you can see in the orange part of the pie graph, these are emissions due to transportation. So emissions associated with all the cars and trucks that are being driven within the city. The second biggest factor is energy. So that's the blue one there. That one's at 29%. And this is electricity and natural gas that's being consumed in the households and by businesses within the city. And then the other 2 factors are water and waste. And as you can see, the amount of waste generated in the city and the amount of water usage, those are smaller components contributing to the city's emissions. And then you can see on this table at the bottom, the exact amount of the units that they use to quantify emissions is equivalent metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. And it's kind of unclear what that means, but to give it some context, 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent is equal to 2,481 miles driven by an average passenger vehicle. And so if you take the total emissions from the city, 9,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, that is equivalent to driving over 20,000 passenger cars for 1 year. And that's a general estimate from California EPA. And the inventory was taken in 2019. So we used the data, city-specific data from 2019 to calculate this. So these are the common climate action strategies that we see in other cities that we want to get feedback on the community in terms of what they think the city should do in terms of reducing their GHG emissions. So for the energy section, there's 4 big ones that we see throughout the state. The first one is requiring new buildings to be all electric. By doing this, you're able to have more renewable energy, so solar, wind, and you have less emissions associated with energy uses within the buildings. The second one is joining the Clean Power Alliance so that you have more renewable energy sources throughout the community. The Clean Power Alliance, Ventura County and other communities are joining this one, but the city of Port Hueneme is not within this Power Alliance at this time. The third one is reducing natural gas consumption in existing buildings. So seeing what policies could be in place to potentially retrofit buildings so that they have more electric infrastructure and not natural gas. And the last one is improving energy efficiency within buildings by more efficient household items like your dryer and other items as well. And then the next section is transportation. So the main strategies here are increasing electrical vehicle infrastructure. So increasing the ability to be able to charge your electrical vehicle and stations for that. The second one is increasing available public and shared transit options. So the amount of buses that are available. And then number 3 is increase active transportation usage and infrastructure. What we mean by that is bike lanes and other ways that people can get around the city that's not using just them in their car by themselves. And then for waste and garbage, this one is actually a requirement of the city, but wanted to provide it for educational purposes, are required by the state, that cities are required to reduce landfill organic waste emissions by 50% by 2022 and 75% by 2025. This is a requirement by Senate Bill 1383. And the cities have already been working on meeting this requirement. And then for water, some strategies are reducing per capita water consumption per household. So having more water efficient infrastructure in the households. The one is reducing stormwater runoff and increasing stormwater infiltration. So having new development have different design so that it reduces the stormwater that's created. And then the last one is carbon sequestration. A strategy is to increase carbon sequestration, so the capture of carbon in the air through planting more trees and developing more green space. So we have a poll to get some initial feedback on these different climate action strategies. And I'll also mention that we just put up a questionnaire on the city's website today to get additional feedback on these strategies to see what the community thinks the city should prioritize.
Lexi, I put a question to you in the chat.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. Your question is the base impact a part of the city numbers? No, those are not incorporated within the city's greenhouse gas inventory.
Yeah, I just kind of point that out because there's a large amount of traffic that flows onto the base every day. And I was just wondering if those emissions are a part of the calculation or not.
Yeah, technically in terms of the traffic going into the base, some of that is accounted for in the inventory. The way that this is calculated is the region takes, you have your trips for each city and for the region, and the ones designated to that city, since they don't know how long people are commuting in, how long people are commuting out, whatever the trip is to that city, they divide it by half. And that half of that trip is accounted for in your city inventory.
I just wanted to respond to Laura Hernandez. It is a select one question in this case, just because we wanted to prioritize the responses received.
Yeah, and I guess to clarify your answer in terms of what's happening at the base, their operations on site are included, but some of the trips to the base and whatnot are within the city's inventory.
Lexi, it looks like we have a good number of responses, so I'm going to end the poll and share the results, and then I think we can head into our further questions on this section.
All right. So the results that we have from this group in terms of which climate action strategies should be prioritized, the highest one was water conservation and stormwater infiltration, followed by increasing carbon sequestration and green space. And then there were a couple of votes for electrification of new existing buildings and increasing the use of active public transportation. So thank you for that. And then we wanted to take a break to see if there were any other questions by folks in the audience on this topic.
I saw Richard's hand up first, if you'd like to ask your question.
Sure. You were giving some pollution standards at the very beginning, and I was wondering, do you have any stats as to how the pollution standard or the pollution that we have in Port Hueneme compares to other cities of that, square mileage or usage or something like that? I don't know what I saw means that we're really good, really bad, or just okay.
Yeah, I think in terms of per usage, like per person within a city, you're on par. Most cities within or throughout the state in California are all very similar. And especially if you look at the breakdown of what types of emissions those are by, they're all the same. So transportation is always the highest one in urban areas for more than half, then followed by energy. And so we see the same profile in every city. The only place where it differs, if you're going into like a more rural area, if you're going more inland and there's more ag, then emissions from agriculture will have a higher percentage or have more closer to transportation.
Okay, and the second thing, it's been kind of a recent discussion topic, and it looked from the survey that it was given a kind of high percentage as far as what the respondees wanted to see, and that was more green space and planting trees. But the one also that was given a high response was the reduction of water, and so it would seem, I mean, from my park background, more green space requires more water. So it seems kind of a little bit of a paradox there as to how to achieve that. That's a comment, and maybe you have some comments on that. Okay, so I have one other one, but let's.
Yeah, no, that is a good point, and that's something that we'll have to quantify in terms of, so we know emissions are, and then we'll have to apply the strategies and then look at what are the emissions resulting from those strategies. So we'll be putting in green spacing and then water, and then for that green space, we'll be incorporating the amount of water that's needed based on some assumptions. So we'll take that into consideration of, okay, even if you put this, how much water would it need to meet state goals, and that can also influence the type of greenscaping that you'll be doing.
Okay, and then two other little ones, and they made is one of the initiatives, or maybe it's built within there, like I know in a number of cities, they've begun to emphasize carpooling as a means to reduce, the transportation emissions. I don't know if that's included in that, or if it's a minor part of it, or whether it's even included in that element. I just know that it's been a strong initiative in other cities, and I don't know how it fits into this.
Yeah, so carpooling is definitely a strategy that we'll look at as well in terms of providing more alternatives to just driving your own car. And you're right, we see it in a lot more projects where they're requiring van pooling, requiring certain companies to incorporate that before a project gets approved. So that's definitely something that we can include and look into more.
The other thing, and maybe it's included, I know that the port has taken a lot of steps to reduce the emissions of boats by, doing various different technical things to reduce the emissions. But are the emissions of the boats, are they out in the ocean so they don't really work their way to us, or do they work their way to us? And is there a way to kind of quantify how much that is?
Yeah, so in terms of the emissions we're looking at, that doesn't include the port and the boats by the port. The port is actually about to kick off their own climate action strategy. Will there be quantifying that? And so those aren't included, but there are ways to look at air quality impacts from the port on the city. Joe, I don't know if you want to add any more to how that's done. I don't know if Joe's still with us, but to answer your question simply, those are included, but there's other ways to evaluate that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Sorry. Sorry about that, Lexi. No, I didn't have anything to add.
Okay. Yeah, that pretty much covers what I had some questions on. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Richard. The next hand up I saw was, and I apologize if I pronounced this wrong, Martiza? Again,
Maritza
apologies.
Avila.
Thank you.
Maritza, thank you, everyone. I know that this probably takes a lot of work to put together, so I appreciate your time and information. I am a resident of Port Hueneme for over 25 years now, and so this is one of the first meetings that I attend. That said, I'm trying to follow along, and I'm just curious as to, and maybe you covered this already, but in terms of communication, for example, about this meeting this evening, how does that information get out? Because I just happened to see it on social media, but I never received a mailer or anything like that. And so then my other question is, what other opportunities do residents have to give you input on this plan?
Sure, I can start answering that and people can jump in if there's anything that I miss. So for your first question in terms of how the workshops are advertised, so like you said, they're on social media. And then we also send notices out to different stakeholders. They're on the city list. We have the city website where people can go 24 hours to be able to sign on to a listserv to get more information on the project update and provide comments. And that way, when we have something that occurs, you'll be notified directly. And we also had in fall for our very first one, we had a utility mailer. So what we did is we advertised this plan process within the utility bills, and that provides all the website information so people could log on and make sure they signed up for the listserv and stayed involved throughout the process. And is there anything else that I'm missing in terms of those outreach items from the rest of the team?
I think we did distribute the workshop announcement and notification to the homeowners associations, as Tony had mentioned as well.
Right, and then also because this is a actual city council workshop, the city clerk would have also advertised this in the newspaper as well.
Yeah, but if you have any other ideas of people that we should be reaching out to, any other ideas of how to get more people involved, we definitely would appreciate those. Because we want to get more people involved. We want to get more people to take the surveys, go to the websites, and be informed in this process. So if anyone has ideas, let us know.
So just last question. So the information that's collected tonight, I guess my question is, what other opportunities will residents have to respond to your questions tonight?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this workshop is being recorded. So we will post it on the website for the general plan update project. And the last workshop is recorded as well. So you can see the previous one. So that's available 24 hours for anyone to be able to go on and see the workshop, what we talked about, see the new questionnaire that we have up there, and then provide any feedback or input. And then we'll be having another workshop in the summer. Once we have the draft plan, we definitely want to get a lot of people involved to be able to see what we've come up with, what's proposed, and get comments on that so that we can do the next steps to finalize that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
And Lexi, if I might just add, there is an email that we posted in the chat a couple layers back, so Andrew can maybe repost that in the chat for us. But and it's can also be found on the city's webpage for the project, but it's GP2040 at cityofporthueneme.org. So people can send comments if they're viewing the recording after tonight's meeting. Like Lexi said on the website, they can send in any questions or comments to that email. And then I think we have some leftover virtual hands that are up potentially from Richard and Kendall. So I think that those have been answered unless I'm wrong, but maybe for time's sake, we can move forward.
I've had my hand up several times now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I could ask, that's okay.
Of course.
Hopefully it's a quick question, quick answer. The Joint Power Alliance, how much information did you give to us about what the Joint Power Alliance is and what the benefits of it are? Because I noticed we got almost no response on it, at least in our small sample here. And I'm wondering if the lack of information may have led to people not selecting that as an option. So
yeah, that's a great question. So we haven't provided any background for the city council on these different options. This is our first time presenting these ideas. And then that's why we're going to have the questionnaire to be able to get more feedback from the community. But I think having that knowledge so that you can inform if this would be a priority or not, we can definitely do that, and we can provide that on the website as well. So maybe some more context for these different strategies.
Right. So if the public and our stakeholders were answering this question and they saw the Joint Power Alliance, you're telling me there was no information describing what the alliance actually does?
No, not in the questionnaire itself. It doesn't explain what the Power Alliance does. If you do Google it, there's lots of information on it, but we can definitely make that easier and provide that in the same area so people don't have to take that step.
Thank you.
Awesome. Again, apologize for missing you, Laura. If there's not anyone else, we can move forward to the next segment.
Thanks, Rachel. The last segment that we're going through is social equity, as this is a new requirement within the general plan update. So again, social equity as it relates to this plan generally means that the city develops policies that are fair to all members of its communities. In other words, making sure the policies developed help all members of the community get access to the same opportunities, such as improved air quality, recreation access, and housing. And similar to the climate action plan element, the state has specific guidance on how to address social equity, or it's also called environmental justice, as outlined in Senate Bill 1000. And environmental justice is defined there as the fair treatment and involvement of all people and communities, regardless of race, gender, national origin, or income level, and the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. And because the city wants to ensure fair treatment and involvement of all people and communities and all laws, regulations, and policies, they've decided to call it social equity element to help make that clear, that it's not just focused on environmental laws, but all laws. So the first step in addressing social equity as it relates to this project is to identify if the city has any communities or populations that are categorized as disadvantaged communities. So again, this is the process outlined within the state guidelines. And the way the state guidelines say to determine this is to look at factors such as economic information of communities, how much money is made per household, for example, how does this relate to cost of housing in that area, and what is the level of environmental pollution in these areas or communities, like air quality. So the state has a specific model that takes all these factors into consideration, and then they have a map that shows if you have what they qualify as a disadvantaged community within your city or not. So according to the state's data and model for how they identify disadvantaged communities, it does not indicate that the city has a disadvantaged community. But again, this is a state model. We do understand that this term and concept has various meanings and definitions to people, and people's opinions on what they think are disadvantaged communities in the city are highly important. So we want to get more feedback from the community if they have any thoughts or opinions on what communities they think the city should be prioritizing in terms of support. And we've been asking this through our stakeholder interviews and our questionnaire that was provided earlier in the process to begin to get that feedback. And also just because the city doesn't have any state identified communities, they're still moving forward on this as a focal point in the plan. And we have some initial policies based on the community outreach that we've done so far that I'm going to show on the next slide. So based on our outreach so far, these are the preliminary social equity policies that the team has come up with in these main categories. The first one is to facilitate effective communication and resources to accelerate recovery following infectious disease outbreak. The second one is to explore opportunities to host a farmers market event within the city. The third one is to identify opportunity sites for a specialty food store, since we've heard that is something that members have wanted in the city and that they don't have currently. Fourth one is to engage with nearby agricultural operators and the Ventura County agricultural community to implement best practices to reduce pesticide drift. So all those are related to public health within the community. And then the next category is technology. So this was something that we heard a lot from residents and stakeholders, is to ensure there's adequate cell service and towers for all residents in the community. We heard that there were some hot spots where that wasn't available. And then another policy that we developed is supporting a system-wide technology plan for school districts that provides equitable access to technology for students. This is something we heard from various people and the school district, that some students don't have access to Wi-Fi and certain things that are needed, and that puts them at a disadvantage for other students in the city. And then there's several other here. For recreation is coordinating with non-governmental organizations to create space and more opportunities for student recreation programs. And looking at your Parks Master Plan update, I know that was a focus there as well. And then for housing, increasing the affordable and first-time home buyer programs. The city already has programs for these, but potentially having a policy to look at increasing those opportunities. And then lastly, under communication, for the city outreach and education materials to be provided in Spanish as well as English. So these are the preliminary policies that we've come up with so far. And so we have a poll to get your initial feedback on these. So let us know which preliminary policy you think is most important to you.
Lexi, may I ask a question at this moment?
Sure.
So the city of Port Hueneme is very close to a Superfund site, which has languished in pollution over the last 30 plus years. And while it's not in the confines of our city, it's definitely in the confines of what we would call community. And it has a negative impact on the city of Port Hueneme. So I'm just wondering, how do you deal with, and there's water issues as well. So how do you deal with an issue that affects our city, but is not within the city?
Yeah, so are you talking about Ormond Beach Superfund site?
Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think specifically for that one, the city could take more initiative to figure out with the EPA what the plan is for that site and cleanup. I also helped City of Oxnard with their local coastal plan, and I know that was a big issue for the city of Oxnard and coordinating with EPA to be able to help. If they could put policies in place for the cities to address that, that would give the EPA more initiative that they would have to do it and coordinate with them on that. So that's a potential option for that site.
I mean, I think it's true that the city's ability to do a lot about something that's outside the city limits is somewhat limited, but that doesn't mean you can't address it through, as Lexi is suggesting, policies encouraging cooperation with the entities that are directly responsible for it, and sort of encouraging things to, improvements to be made and the issue to be remediated. So, but yeah, unfortunately, the city's ability to actively make something happen at a site outside the city's boundaries is somewhat limited.
Great, thank you, Joe and Lexi. I'm gonna end the poll and share the results right now.
All right, so it looks like the number one that was voted in this group was opportunities for student recreation as being the most important, followed by equitable access to technology for students. And the other one that got votes were hosting a farmer's market, reducing pesticide drift, adequate cell service for all residents, and increasing first-time homebuyer opportunities and city communication in Spanish. All right, so that includes the entirety of our presentation. So we can open it up to any additional, I guess before we go that, if anyone has any additional discussion questions for the social equity piece of the general plan update.
I do.
Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. I don't have the raised hand on my screen here. I have everything else. I have the guy with the party hat on and the two other emojis, and I've got the thumbs up and the clapping, so I'm using what I think is the next best one. I had a question regarding the strategy to better inform the public after an infectious disease outbreak, and I can only imagine that that's there because of what we're going through now with COVID-19. But in reality, wouldn't you agree that that kind of communication should follow any major disaster, not just an infectious disease? I mean, I would have selected that, but I know that that's covered in other plans. And I also would like to see that be more multi-hazard than just specific to pandemic or infectious disease.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And we have certain policies like that throughout other parts of the general plan update. One in particular is the safety element. And so we proposed it like that as a new type of policy that isn't in there now. There's no mention of infectious disease, but we can make sure to clarify that that also means after any natural or any disaster, infectious disease or other natural disaster.
Mm-hmm. And then how does, thank you for that, I appreciate it. How does hosting a farmer's market relate to social equity? What's the idea behind that?
The connection with that is the availability to have access to healthy food, especially at affordable prices. If you go to a certain grocery store, the organic type of food could be at a higher cost than if you was available at the farmer's market. So it's just increasing the access to healthy foods, of having like another opportunity to be able to purchase those.
And also providing a marketplace for local agricultural growers.
Right. So is that an actual issue for our community, considering that we're surrounded with fruit stands and vegetable stands, and we're in the middle of an ag environment? is that an issue? I know affordability of those items of vegetables and fruits and healthy foods is an issue, but access to them, is that an issue that you found existed for our community?
In terms of access, like you are right, it is surrounding the area, but that was something that was still brought up as something the community was interested in seeing, is a farmer's market within the community. So maybe it's to have all those different produce in one place at a certain time. So maybe that's part of it, is the convenience of having a farmer's market. Even though you have it all around you, it's still probably be easier if it was just right within your city.
Okay, so this input came from one of our respondents then, is that correct?
Correct. This is input that we got from the questionnaire.
Okay, thank you.
So people are interested in seeing a farmer's market.
And I will say that it might make sense to have a policy like this somewhere else instead. We could certainly look into whether this might fit better into one of the other general plan elements, whether it be land use or some other topic where it seems to fit better.
Yeah, it just
doesn't have to go in this particular element.
Yeah, it seems to me that the social equity portion of the plan needs some additional work. So I hope that we can spend some more time looking at some more workable policies, some actual real policies that I think we're experiencing as a county, not just as a community in Port Hueneme. So I'd like to have more input on that section if the opportunity allows.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why we bring ideas to the forefront, because once we bring the ideas, then people have lots of other ideas. So this is just a starting place that we wanted to start that discussion with the community.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I see Bobby Martinez has their hand up. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, I was wondering, what can we, I mean, is it a possibility that we can do something in terms of limiting plastic in our city to be a little bit more environmentally safe? It's just a question that I wanted to play around with. Is that something that we can do? Or what kind of options do we have in terms of lowering plastic, like plastic bags? I know, I know plastic is a big issue in the world right now.
Joe, I see you're unmuted. You want to answer it?
Yeah, there's certainly nothing to prevent the city from including policies along those lines. Of course, the state has sort of already, a lot of cities were considering the plastic bag ban for a number of years, and now the state has done that. We are working definitely with cities that are actively looking at prohibiting polystyrene still, so that's still out there. That's certainly something the city could look at. That could be in the guise of the social equity, but I think more likely probably in a conservation element or something like that. We might include such a policy if that's of interest. But yeah, there are absolutely things the city could do to limit or prohibit certain types of plastics if they would like to.
Okay, that's really good news. Thank you. Thank you so much. And you know what, since I'm already on unmuted, what can I do to basically promote this recording? Because I don't think we did a pretty good job of, getting the word out. And I would have liked to have seen more people participate in the survey, because I know they can rewatch this recording, but they're not going to be able to vote, or are they? Or is there going to be another survey out? I'm even thinking about putting out my own survey. So I think we can probably get more input that way too.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a questionnaire for the climate action strategies specifically, since that is something that the state wants to see. But we also have other opportunities to add additional surveys. If people, I see in the comment of getting more feedback in terms of the social equity, that's something that we could do as well. So whatever ideas or topics that the council thinks we should be getting more feedback on, we can develop surveys for that as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
If I might add, Bobby, I think there's also a lot of weight and worth to extend when you hear about an event, share it through your own respective network. Because, for instance, if you're using social media as an example, you have whatever network the city has lucked out in terms of subscribers to their Facebook or other respective social media platforms. And so if you distribute it to your own contacts within the city, I think that's something that we would highly encourage going forward. And like Lexi said, you can sign up for project-related updates through the project webpage on the city's website, so you can be in the know, so to speak, and that's a great way of going about that. So just wanted to make that additional plug for sharing with your own networks, because that just helps us spread further out and reach more people. And then I did want to just note that we had a hand up for Stephen. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you. Interesting, today I heard that one of the major chemical companies has and is developing a biodegradable plastic, which would be pretty amazing. So I found that to be really interesting today. And I do know that you have probably way more interaction with state officials than we do because of the fact that you work for various municipalities and you do great work in that regard. One of the things, it's kind of similar to the issue of we need more trees, but you got to reduce your water usage. But when it comes to the cannabis industry, that's obviously blowing up. So while we eliminate the use of plastic bags, the cannabis industry is being required to use plastic containers that are single use. And in our weekly beach cleanups, we're finding these plastic material, containers all over the beach and the areas. And so I just wanted to mention that, like I said, we take a couple steps forward and then we take a step backwards. So like while we're eliminating plastic bags, now we're requiring cannabis people to package in plastic single use and it ends up on the beach. So that's more like a comment than a question, sorry.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting facet and pertinent to Port Hueneme because how much cannabis is sold within the city. So thanks for that comment.
Awesome. Lexi, I don't see any other comments or raised hands. And then I think, Joe, you might have had a response to the question pertaining to that asked, could bike lanes be created to increase community connectivity and activities for the youth? So just wanted to...
Sure, yeah, I can just very quickly. Yeah, absolutely, bike lanes are something we're looking at that is going to be addressed in the circulation element, but I agree that also is an equity question, and we would probably want to do some cross-referencing between those two elements as we put the plan together. But yeah, that's a good thought.
Whoa.
Was there another verbal question or comment?
Lexi, I saw a question earlier that I think everyone could benefit from hearing. And it's regarding the cars that are imported through the port and drive on our roads to the processing facilities. Are those trips being calculated in our climate emissions study?
So do you mind clarifying that one? I haven't been able to read the chat. So it's the cars that are imported to the port and then where they're driven from there?
Correct. In other words, they import cars, they come into the port, and then they're driven down Hueneme Road to the processing facility. So I would imagine that the question is are we able to account for those emissions, or is it done through whatever the port's required to do?
Yeah, that is a very specific technical question for that inventory. So I'll have to look in that one because it's such a short trip that I don't know if that's included within the inventory. But I can check to see if they have that detail in there and follow up on that.
It is a short trip, but there are literally hundreds of cars that go through there at any given time.
There are traffic studies, however, and I think, I don't know how current they are, but there are some planned traffic studies to be done by the port. So it might be worth your while to connect with the port and take a look at those as you proceed with the planning.
Yeah, that'll definitely help as we look into the forecast of emissions in the future to be able to look at the port's future plans. Thanks for that suggestion.
Okay, are we coming to the end of this meeting? I do see a hand being raised by Stephen Placiel.
Hey, Stephen, would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I came to the meeting a little late here, and in regards to the land use, and my question was about the cannabis companies coming to town, right off of 250 Surfside Drive that backs right up to my home, and also Red Mule, which is going to be having a retail outlet right at the corner of Wainimi Road and Surfside Drive. How are they progressing with that? Is there full steam ahead? Were you able
yes,
to?
Basically that's not really pertinent to this particular topic because we are looking at a much larger picture and we're not looking at specific properties. But there are activities that we can discuss offline with regard to those particular properties. You can go ahead and email the city's website, and I can go ahead and respond to you with regard to those particular properties.
Okay, and who is that was just speaking?
This is Tony Stewart, the Community Development Director.
Tony Stewart, okay, yeah, we've met before. Okay, great, I will do so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this is last chance for any comments, questions for our consultants.
And I did want to finish up with the next steps of the process as well for people to be involved. So we could show that slide.
Okay, thank you, Lexi. I thought you were at the end of your presentation. Sorry.
I am. I just wanted to present these next steps so people have a visual as well. So upcoming events and project updates, you can go to the project webpage, check the different social media outlets, go to the climate action strategy questionnaire that's up right now. And then we are having an environmental impact report scoping meeting on Earth Day, April 22nd, 2021. So that'll be specific to the environmental impact report of the general plan update. And that's to get initial concerns that the community has on the environmental impact report. It won't have what the analysis is, but it's a scoping meeting. So being able to get a sense of what certain things the community is concerned about, that we want to make sure we're aware of those before we start the environmental impact report process. And then we'll be conducting a future workshop in summer of 2021. And then you can also send in any questions and comments you have to the email for this project, which is gp2045@cityofportwainimi.org. So we can get those 24 hours of the day. Thank you all for having us here today.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions before we adjourn? Last chance. Okay. I'm going to adjourn this meeting to the next regular city council meeting of April 5th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. would like to wish everybody a wonderful evening and would like to also thank everybody for participating. And for those of you who have participated, if you could get the word out to others who might be interested in this discussion so that they could go to the website and participate. And let's all try to increase community involvement in our meetings. And I know the council is very much interested in the community being involved. So to everybody that attended tonight, thank you very much. And thank you all. And this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Everybody be safe.
Be safe.